Well, you have a lot of tour dates coming up, both here in the States and over there on your side of the Atlantic. How do you prepare for a big tour? Do you rehearse extensively or do you just try to keep it looser?
Well, I have to. I'm going to have to rehearse quite a bit before I come out to the States this time because I haven't done any live shows for 2 years, over 2 years.
Who's the personnel on the upcoming tour?
It's Richard Watts on bass and vocals, and he's on Roots and Branches, and Chris Taggart is the drummer on Roots and Branches, and he's the drummer on the tour.
Nice. So they'll have some ownership over the material. Are you going to try and play a lot from the new album, along with the mandatory required?
I think I'll end up doing about 3, maybe 4 from the new album.
That'd be great. I'm not going to be able to catch the Midwest or East Coast stuff, but when you do come back for the West Coast, I'll be right there in the front row.
Oh, cool.
Now, over the course of your career, you've given hundreds, if not thousands, of live performances. Are there any that stand out in your mind as being particularly magical or transcendent?
Well, the one that I always think of as being special was playing at Winterland in San Francisco, and it was the first time we'd ever performed Bridge of Sighs.
Ooh.
And it was before it was recorded.
Wow.
And just the reaction to it on that night, it'll stay with me forever.
Wow. People used to ask Led Zeppelin what it was like the first time they performed Stairway to Heaven. Robert Plant said the audience was bored because it was really slow. Nobody knew what it was. It was like it flopped. But I can imagine Bridge of Sighs with no pre-warning, so sort of blowing the audience back a bit. And isn't the Bridge of Sighs a bridge in Venice where a condemned prisoner, it's their last time to see the outdoors before they're executed? Do I have that right?
That's the legend. I'm not sure how true it is.
Well, I hope that's the case because I did some research and I found that the term's also used sometimes for students who are, crossing this bridge to their exam.
Yeah.
And that's really wimpy. It doesn't deserve your song the way a person being executed, the depth of James Dewar's vocal, the beauty of it. It's so poignant. If it's just a bunch of kids taking the test, boo for that. At the risk of opening old wounds, are there any disastrous gigs that you might be willing to recount for us?
Let me think. I can remember playing, must be about 20 years ago. We turned up and did a show in Canada, and it hadn't been advertised, and I think there was 4 people in the audience.
Wow.
I'd call that a bit of a disaster.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, I always think of that story Greg Lake tells about the fireworks display. Do you know that one?
No.
They're performing, must have been Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and they had a fireworks display behind the stage, aimed at the sky. But as they played, it gradually tilted and tilted and tilted. That at the end of the show, when they're ready to shoot it off, instead of going up in the sky, it went straight at the audience.
Oh my goodness.
Enough above their heads that no one was hurt. But I guess some kind of rocket shot between someone's legs on stage. It was like, what?
Pretty scary.
Well, I saw you perform at the Sacramento Memorial Auditorium on your Victims of the Fury tour with Bill Lorden on drums and James Dewar on bass and vocals. I'm sure you remember me. I was probably in the 12th row, a little off to your left. You've been consistent about keeping to the one guitar, bass and drums, power trio instrumentation, but you have alternated between having a band member like James Dewar do the lead vocals and having a designated lead vocalist like Davey Pattison. I'm sure financially, your preference is to have fewer people to pay, but in musical terms, do you have a preference between those two options?
I definitely prefer a 3-piece. It just gives me a feeling of a bit more freedom live when you haven't got a singer that's standing out front, as it were. Because you always feel you've got to make room for him musically as well as on stage. So I'm definitely more comfortable in a 3-piece.
Yeah, because when you start soloing, singing bass player can just play the bass. They have something to do, or the singer's got to grab a tambourine or try and think of something.
That's an uncomfortable time for the singer. Quite often Davey would just walk off to the side of the stage while I was boring everybody with my solo.
Well, if you're the focus of attention at that moment, it can be distracting. If somebody's playing a drum solo, you don't want to be sitting on the side of the stage trying to get the audience's attention. It's their moment.
Yeah.
Speaking of singing bass players, I always found the pairing of your iconic guitar sound with the iconic vocals of Jack Bruce to be very inspired. Many of my listeners probably remember your BLT and Truce albums, but I'm equally fond of Seven Moons, which you did together, much more recently with Gary Husband from Level 42 on drums. There's some excellent, hard-hitting stuff on there that the listeners might be less familiar with, so I want to take a minute to spotlight one of my favorite tracks on that album. From their Seven Moons collaboration, here are Robin Trower and Jack Bruce with Lives of Clay. Well, in 2005, you scored a film called The Good Humor Man. This was a period piece set in the 1970s starring Jason Segel and Kelsey Grammer. Film scoring typically involves writing relatively short pieces to support visual imagery, which is quite a departure from what you normally do. So did you find that process to be challenging?
It was challenging, but it was a great deal of fun, and I really enjoyed it and got a lot of satisfaction out of doing it too.
Well, it contained all the elements you usually encounter in a film, namely sex and violence. You had some interesting scenes to cover, like a group of nuns chasing some trespassers out of a church. You had some delinquent teenagers taunting a police officer with fireworks, and so on. I particularly enjoyed the theme you wrote that played over the credit sequences. It had a light funkiness to it and some acoustic rhythm guitar softening it all up, which is a bit different for you. Just a great overall vibe. So I want to take a minute to listen to that. How were you offered the job to score that film?
Well, Teddy, the director, was a fan, and because he was making a 70s movie, he thought of getting a 70s musician,
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, as soon as I was offered it, I said, let me have a look at a few bits of the film that you've got, and I'll see what I can do.
Did he give you much guidance in terms of what he wanted from the cues?
No, not at all. I just sent him in. He sent me the film, the video, and I made music to it. I think he had to edit quite a bit because I think the film was, that I made music to was a lot longer than what ended up. So he edited the film and the music, So it's a lot of fun to do, though, a neat experience.
Well, hopefully you'll get an opportunity to do another one.
I don't think I could take on another one because it's very time-consuming, and I'd rather concentrate on my own stuff.
Fair enough, but it's still nice to explore that type of thing. And as a person who likes the music you wrote and who saw the film, I'm glad that you did it. Well, now let's bring it back to Roots and Branches. You'll occasionally take on the role of lead vocalist yourself. Before hearing this album, my favorite vocal performance of yours was probably Breathless. But there's a track on Roots and Branches called See My Life that has definitely taken over that title for me. Not only a great vocal performance, but also your usual great guitar work and just a great overall song. What's the story behind the writing of that one?
Well, I mean, the lyric, in actual fact, is a very personal. I think it's one of the few lyrics I've actually written about me. So it's a very personal power blues. That's the way I think of it.
Well, you decided to end the album with that track, and I think it's also an appropriate ending for this podcast as well. So I'm going to play that in a moment. But before I let you go, I just want to express how much I appreciate the impact you've had on my own personal musicianship. I learned an awful lot about soloing on the guitar from covering your material in my own formative years, and I know a lot of guitar players who listen to the show and a lot of the big names who've appeared on the show consider you to be one of our primary guitar teachers. So I just wanted to thank you for your contribution to the music world and make sure you are aware just how much it's been appreciated.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I mean, that's lovely to hear.
I want to direct everyone to Robin's official website, which is trowerpower.com, TROWERPOWER. I also want to remind everyone about his upcoming tour in the U.S. from October through November of this year, and in Europe in March and April of next year. And finally, of course, I want to encourage you all to pick up his excellent Roots and Branches CD, which has many more great tracks we didn't have time to play today. You don't want to miss out on that. Well, on behalf of myself and my listeners, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. You've been a personal hero of mine for years, so it's been a real privilege.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
Treasures still lay buried, that may be how it should remain. And though the light begins to fade, I may have time to serve one last page. See my footprints in the dust, fainter now the hands do turn. Facial scenes of loss, a backward stare with fingers burned. Maybe want to bridge too far, but I just want to play my guitar. Train that I rode on, well, it went down